Today we are going to talk about lab safety. So, in general safety rules, it's important that we listen to or read instructions carefully before attempting to do anything. We normally did an activity that can demonstrate this, but it's important you read through all of the procedures before you start the steps because you don't want to be halfway in there and realizing what you have to do. You can't because you're already in it. So always listen to or read everything before doing anything. We are going to wear safety goggles to protect our eyes from chemicals. Whenever we heat materials or if we're using glassware that might shatter, we will always be using safety goggles. If there is a spill or an accident, the first rule of thumb is to always notify the teacher. The teacher has to know what's going on. Let the teacher know what's going on so we can handle it properly. After we handle chemicals, always wash our hands with soap and water. Make sure and dry them. Make sure you during lab work you keep your hands away from your face. If Corona has taught us anything, it's about being aware of how we touch our hands and our face. But if you had chemicals on your hand, the last thing you want to do is rub your eyes and get chemicals in your eyes. If you have long hair, you will need to tie it back on a lab day where we use a burner or where it might be a problem. That's not the way you want to get a haircut. It is extremely unpleasant to get your hair burned off. Not that I would know, but it seems like it would be. If you have long sleeves, you're going to roll them up, keep them out of the way. You should know the location of the fire extinguisher, the fire blanket, the eye wash station, and first aid kit. All of which are going to be demonstrated in the room tour video. You can see them. It's also in the matching activity on the Nearpod. Keep your work area uncluttered. So when we're working in the lab, you want to have only at the lab what you need. If your books aren't needed, you're going to move them off to the side or put them on the floor out of the way. Last thing you want to do is trip and cause an accident because we have a cluttered workspace. Never put anything into your mouth during a lab experiment. If it's chemicals or food, there were labs we did with food. We are not doing those anymore. But you would never want to put a chemical or a substance in your mouth that might cause a problem. At the end of the class period, you can clean up your lab activity or your lab area. And we're never going to horse around. We're never going to run, throw things, trip each other. A lab, if we get into the lab this year, is an extremely, it can be a dangerous place. Hard tables, hard floor. The tables are slate. You crack your head on the corner of that, and it's going to be very unpleasant. So we don't run, we don't chase, we don't horse around in the laboratory. If you have glassware that's chipped or cracked, so you see a chip or a crack in any glassware, do not use it. Show it to the teacher so they can dispose of it properly. If you are pouring liquids into glassware, so you're filling a beaker or a graduated cylinder, please make sure the container is on the table and it's resting not on the edge of the table, but kind of far away. If you accidentally break a piece of glassware, a test tube of beaker or graduated cylinder, please do not clean it up yourself. First rule of thumb comes back into play. Tell the teacher. He will come or she will come to help clean up the mess. You are not to do it. I will do it carefully. I don't want you cutting yourself, making a simple situation worse by causing yourself harm. If we are using hot glassware, so we're doing a boiling water lab, if the glassware is hot, please do not throw it into the cold water right away. The rapid change in temperature can cause that glassware to shatter. If you've ever done that at home, and you're not to do that at home because it's very dangerous, but if you change temperature on a glass material or porcelain very quickly, it has a tendency to shatter, and we don't want it to hurt anybody or have anything shatter on us. If we are using chemicals, you wear protective goggles and a lab apron. A lab apron is not necessary. I will tell you on days that we're doing a lab that you may not want to wear certain clothes because some of the chemicals do stain or can cause some damage to them. But we will always, if we're using chemicals, we have goggles and we have goggles on our face. We're not on our forehead. We're using them the right way. Regular glasses are not sufficient enough. If you have contacts, they're not sufficient enough. If you have regular glasses, you will wear goggles over your regular glasses so you can see and you are protected. You are never to mix chemicals together unless you are told to do so, and then only in the manner specified. You mix the wrong chemicals together in a way, you can cause a lot of damage. one year I wanted to clean the fridge, and I thought that, well, bleach cleans very well. Ammonia cleans very well. If I mix them, it's got to clean fantastic. What I did was mix two chemicals that create a toxic gas, which you don't want to do. So we don't mix chemicals together unless you are told to, and it's part of the lab. We never taste any chemicals. You should never taste anything in the lab unless you are told to do so. We will not be doing a lot of labs with foodstuffs anymore, but if there is ever a time where there is foodstuff, like a marshmallow for a marshmallow catapult, you are not to eat my lab equipment. Now, if you need to smell the odor of a chemical, you're going to waft the fumes. I've attached a video on the Nearpod that explains what that means. You don't just reach your nose over and take a big whiff, because if it's a toxic chemical, you just killed yourself. Or you just gave yourself quite a bit of brain damage by breathing in chemicals you shouldn't breathe in. So we're going to waft the fumes, which means, and again, in the video, you'll see how he brushes his hand over the beaker or the graduated cylinder, so he can kind of get a sense of the odor, but it's not too concentrated. Now, we don't pour acids and bases too often, but if you are pouring water into a concentrated acid, it's poured slowly so you don't spill it. Make sure that when we're done with chemicals, some of the chemicals we use can be thrown away. Some of them cannot be thrown away in the trash or put down the sink. Make sure you follow any directions of the teacher when disposing of all chemicals, and definitely wash your hands. Key point: if you've ever cut like jalapenos and thought you washed your hands afterwards, and then rubbed your eyes a little later and realized I didn't do a good job washing my hands, you know that you don't get all the chemicals. Hopefully in this day and age, you're washing your hands very well. I think it's the Happy Birthday tune twice, but especially if you're doing chemicals, you're going to wash your hands. We will be dealing with electrical equipment. Electrical safety is important. We are not going to have cords crossing across the gap between the tables and the wall so people can trip on them. If we are plugging or unplugging something, we are going to make sure our hands in our lab area are dry. Water and electricity work very well together, more than we wanted to. So we try not to mix them very easily. And finally, we never poke anything to electrical outlets. If you have a pencil or a pen or a fork, you are not to stick it in an electrical outlet. Should I have to say that? No. Do I have to say it? Yes, because it has occurred. You do it wrong one time, and that's the last thing you'll ever do. It's 120 amps, but it's the volts that are going to get 120 volts, but it's the amps that are going to get you. And if it runs through your body through an outlet, it's enough to stop your heart. So we don't play around with electricity. We play with it, but we don't play around with it. If that makes sense. If we are unplugging a cord, we're going to unplug by the plug, not the cord. We are not going to do like if I do vacuuming and I'm 2 rooms away and I just pull the cord and hope for the best that comes out of the wall. We don't do that. We go ahead and just reach the plug itself and easily unplug it. And at the end of the class period, if you were told to do so, you should unplug the lab equipment. It should not stay plugged in. We will be heating things. We have burners and hot plates. We also have Bunsen burners. I like to use the Bunsen burners a little more because they're a gas flame as opposed to an electric flame, so it's a little more easy to control it. Plus, it looks a lot cooler. But if we are dealing with hot plates or burners or Bunsen or beakers, always make sure they let them cool down before you touch them. Glass does not change its color when it's red or when it's hot. So glass that's really hot won't look any different than it does normally. So you touch it, you're going to be stuck with something really hot in your hand you don't want. So we're going to use tongs and or protective gloves to handle hot objects. If we're using our Bunsen burner, we never reach across an open flame or a burner. We are going to heat, if we are using materials like test tubes or graduated cylinders or beakers or Erlenmeyer flasks or anything that we're using, we're only using the glassware that was approved by me or the other teachers. We're not just, I want to heat my soda up or my coffee up, I'll put it on the burner. No, that does not happen. If it does, you don't do labs anymore. If you are looking at test tubes, always point the top end of the test tube that's being heated away from people. If that fluid heats up and erupts, if you're looking into that test tube, it only has one way to go, and that's at you. If you're heating a test tube, you want to move it around slowly over the flame to make sure it gets heated evenly. If we are heating glassware, we want to make sure that it's dry first because we don't want that water to cause a problem with steam or causing extra moisture. When we do Bunsen burners, we'll use ring stands. We'll use a gauze wire on a ring stand. I'll show you a model tomorrow when I demonstrate. We don't hold glassware in our hand while we heat it because eventually it's going to get so hot you can't hold it anymore. And then what are you going to do? So we always use a ring stand, which has these little circular ring holders and gauze that goes over it to protect it from the heat. I will go through this tomorrow, but when we light a burner, we wait until the striker is in place before you turn on the gas, which means you're ready to go. Before you turn on the gas, you have to have the striker or the match or the lighter ready to go. Don't turn the gas on and then start looking around for the lighter, because in the meantime, you're filling up the room with gas. And when you do find it, you're going to have a much more strong reaction than you want. So we make sure we have all the equipment ready. We make sure no one's near it. You can adjust the air of the air supply valve below the tube of the burner. It regulates the size of the flame, the color of the flame. Key thing is we never leave a burner or a hot plate unattended. If we're working on a lab station with a burner on it, if it's burning, we are at that station monitoring it. We don't just walk away from our station. Okay, first aid. If an accident does occur, some ideas of what to do. If you have a burn, immediately flush it with cold water. Run it under cold water. That should lessen it. If it's a severe burn, like a second or third degree burn, you would still run it under cold water, but then you would talk to myself or Mr. Yankee and talk about processing it with a nurse, because there's only so much that we can do with a burn. The form in the Nearpod shows you the varieties of burns and what to do for each kind. First aid, if you have a cut or a bruise, and this does happen, my fingers and legs get cut all the time in the class. Don't touch an open wound without safety gloves, because if you have chemicals on you and you touch an open wound, you now have chemicals in the open wound. However, if you have a small cut and you apply pressure to it directly, it should stop bleeding in a few minutes. Cold compress would help reduce swelling. If it does not, or if it's a deeper cut, then again, you fall back to the same rule of, and even in this situation, always tell the teacher. Okay, a lot of times kids, I need a Band-Aid. Well, what for? Well, I cut myself. I should have heard that first, then ask for the Band-Aid. But I'll give you the Band-Aid still. If for some reason someone faints, provide fresh air. Try not to hover over them. Give them space. Have them recline so their head is lower than the rest of their body. I've never had anybody faint in this class, so I don't think that's going to be an issue, but it is a first aid concept. If you have eyes, which you do, if you get something in your eyes, you want to flush them out with plenty of water for several minutes. There are eye wash stations in the science rooms. You want to flush them out. Do not just go ahead and rub your eyes, because if it's something that's solid, you're moving that solid piece around in your eyeball. That is not what you're looking to do. So we flush them out with a lot of water for a couple minutes. That should remove the object out. If it's a more severe situation, then always we would inform the nurse. And again, you should inform me. And I'll first tell you, why do you have something in your eyes? Because if we're doing chemicals, you should have had your goggles on. If you are poisoned, it has never happened. It should never happen. But if you ingest something that you're not sure of what it is, I do have binders that show all the chemicals and the responses to them. But as always, alert the teacher immediately if you are poisoned. If you have a spill on the skin, flush it with a large amount of water. So if we are doing acids and bases, you spill something, take into account what it is. If we're doing a lab that involves milk and you spill milk on yourself, you really don't have to panic and flush your skin and do. No, you have to rinse, wash your hands. But if we're dealing with an acid or a base or a chemical, you're going to want to make sure you flush them with large amounts of water to dilute them as best as possible. If it's an acid spill, you'll apply baking soda because that will neutralize it. If it's a base spill like a cleaner, you'd apply vinegar or boric acid, and that would also neutralize it. Again, this happens to me once in a while because when I do elephant toothpaste, I'm using a I'm blanking on the name. I'm using a chemical that's extremely caustic, and if I spill it on my skin, it will give me a chemical burn for a day or two. So we always make sure we flush out our skin with large amounts of water. If we have a problem with electricity, there's electrical shock. You're going to shut off the current at the source. If Timmy is being shocked, you do not grab Timmy, because now Timmy and you are being shocked, and now I have an issue that I have to handle with two kids. If you're being shocked, and I'll talk about the proper way of kind of approaching some things, shut off the current at the source, remove the wire with wet rubber gloves, alert the teacher. Does anybody have any questions? If you do, please ask your teacher. Otherwise, you'll complete the Nearpod that will review this information. I hope that was informative. Any questions, please ask your teacher.